everyone, and welcome to the Naavik Gaming Podcast, a podcast in which we explore the business and future of video games. I'm Aaron Bush, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Christian Facey. Christian is the co-founder and CEO of Audiomob, is building at the cutting edge of ad tech, and today we're going to dive deep into his view of the ad tech market and learn more about all things Audiomob. Christian, welcome to the pod.
Hey Aaron, thanks for having me. Really looking forward to this.
Me too. And to kick things off, maybe let's lay the foundation for our listeners. What is Audiomob's mission, and what's the story of why and how you started this company?
So our mission originally was to link mobile and audio opportunities, but our ideas and dreams have gotten much bigger than that, and we want to become the ultimate audio content delivery platform. And what we do is we invented non-intrusive audio ads in games. So imagine, you're racing a car, and for you to get a power up or to get an extra life and continue playing, you need to watch a 30-second video ad. It gets quite annoying, even though video ads are a really good way to monetize in this current gaming ecosystem. But what we do is imagine that you crash the car or you need a power up, and you could listen to a radio ad coming out of a car radio, for instance. It annoys players less, it's incremental revenue for the game developers, and the advertisers, the brand advertisers, get a 2,000% increase in engagement. So there's a real trifecta of value between those three participants, and that's what we do.
Gotcha. And we'll discuss more details about Audiomob specifically in a little bit, but first I just want to talk a bit more about this ad tech market, and specifically the role of audio ads in general. And so when I think of audio ads, the first thing that pops into my mind, and I'm sure I'm not alone, is the kind of stuff that you hear on Spotify, SoundCloud, or the radio. Audio ads on audio-driven media, right? And you gave one example, but I'm curious if you could expand on what you just said a little bit more. What does it really mean to have an audio ad on a non-audio-driven media like games? And you gave the example of, maybe listening to like a radio in a car as you're racing, but maybe could you just give another example or two of like what this looks like and how it can work?
So I guess I could use an example in the video ad medium, right? So you've got a video ad, it's being put into a video ad medium such as YouTube or TV. And while it gets your attention in a more forceful, intrusive way, it does block the primary motive. You don't go to television to watch ads, or you don't go to YouTube to watch ads. You go there to consume content that you have chosen to view. And it's quite interesting because when you take an audio ad that's being put into Spotify, for instance, your primary motive is to listen to a podcast or a piece of music, not to view the ad. So it is still intrusive. However, there have been examples where, for instance, you're highly engaged in a different action, even though audio is the medium from which you transfer a message. Let's take driving in a car. Hopefully, you'd be really engaged in driving the car so you don't crash or run over people, right? But an audio ad in a car, you're engaged driving, but the audio ad has got your attention. But that's not like the core thing that you often concentrate on. So if you could take your programmatic out of home ads, such as your Amazon Alexa or your Google device, what you'll see is that often that is playing in the background. You're engaged in something else, and then the audio ad comes in and it just plays and intermingles with what you're listening to in the background. Now, what the fascinating thing here is if you take an audio ad and you intermingle it into a medium where you are actually engaged in something else and you're not blocking the medium, we take away that annoyance that the audio ad is, blocking the game, because it's not. You can still drive that car. And it's not like it's blocking a critical component of the game, which could be, for instance, the sound of the car driving. However, audio ads don't work if you were to be put into a mobile game like Guitar Hero, for instance, where you need the audio cues in order to progress through the game. That would be intrusive. Yeah. So if you use an engaging medium where the presentation of the ad isn't blocking the engaging medium and kind of interacts natively around it or in it, then you've got the golden trifecta, because you're taking advantage of that engagement without actually blocking the engagement. That's why I use the driving car example, because it's a golden opportunity and a best-in-class example of what we do.
Yeah, it even reminds me of just playing like GTA, where you're in a car and there is the radio, and they make sure to make it it's not the main thing you're focused on, but they, try to make it entertaining and valuable. And obviously ads are a bit different from what they do at GTA. But, if you make it interesting, it could still, add value to the player as well. But that's cool. So give us a sense of the market today then, maybe excluding, the music podcast radio corners of the market. How big is the audio ad market today, for what you're working on, and how quickly is it growing?
So depending on how you look at, how it's cut, so to speak, I mean, you could easily find close to $100 billion of audio ad revenue, but it's very cut up into podcast, into music, analog radio as well. There's still a lot of traditional ad dollars that are filtering into digital radio. So it's cut up into a number of segments, but it's still a very, very big market. It's growing anywhere between 20 to 30%, and it is definitely more resistant than certain performance-oriented, like the display market, for instance, in a downturn, because audio tends to be much cheaper. So yeah, it's a very, very big, very, very fast-growing market, and there's a reason why Spotify is worth tens of billions of dollars. Its double-digit compromisation of revenue is actually around audio ads and how much audio ads it can deliver. So it's a really, really lucrative medium to get involved in.
Yeah, well, maybe if we drill that into games, how big is this? I guess how big is the opportunity for this in games versus where we are today? Do you have any numbers around that are interesting to share?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you take the gaming market right now, it's around $110 billion roughly in terms of what could be attributed towards mobile gaming, and that is at least due to double within the next 8 years or so, well, close to 7 years now. When you take the audio ad market and what is being potentially funneled into the gaming market, I mean, you've got at least $40 billion roughly in the audio programmatic ecosystem that now, because of Audiomob and other players that have entered our space, can be programmatically connected to the mobile gaming space. So I want you to think about this as like the largest untapped tranche of spend to hit mobile, perhaps since rewarded video. And the reason that this has just suddenly come out of nowhere is that the groundwork has now been done to connect an audio ad that could have gone to Spotify straight into a mobile game with all the kinks in terms of the rewarded audio mechanisms, all the different API calls that need to be made so it fits into the game nicely. All of that has now been done. So yeah, the opportunity is absolutely humongous.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's super interesting. And I'm curious, maybe if we zoom in a bit more to what you've seen so far. I know you gave, again, the car example and a couple others, but in terms of on, I guess, mobile specifically, what are the best subgenres that, you've already seen like interesting success cases in with audio ads that have, added a new like ad unit, which is interesting, but like have kind of helped them unlock kind of a new pillar of their advertising strategy?
So I'd say pretty much any mobile game that is not story driven, so there isn't a dialogue or anything character driven in there, because that tends to be a very, very, like, we wouldn't try and go into Grand Theft Auto the story mode in a mobile game, for instance, because it just wouldn't work in that sense. Any kind of non-story driven game, or any game that doesn't rely specifically on audio. So, for instance, I used the Guitar Hero example already. If you're GTA shooting up enemies in the story mode, robbing a bank, and you hear like an audio blasting out, it just wouldn't work. So those are the only two examples that I can that we've really researched. But then across every single kind of mobile game that we've integrated with, I've used racing as an obvious example. You've got hyper casual, right? You've got hyper casual games. The average session time is anywhere between 4 and 7 minutes, roughly. And you've got some rewarded videos that could be in there. Some people accept them if they're non-rewarded and full screen. Other users, for instance, will grind on those rewarded ads to kind of get some power-ups. Other users will do that to a certain extent. And then you've got the users that just won't interact with any of the IAP stuff, any of the video, etc. We can really appeal to those kinds of users in any kind of hyper casual game, whether it's your typical one clicker, whether it's a hyper casual racing game, a hyper casual action game, etc. But then you've got your puzzle games, which is really interesting because that has a very high level of engagement because the users are actually using their brain power in order to solve the said puzzles and progress through the levels. So there's only a certain amount of video ads that you can add before it breaks immersion and then the users drop off. If the users drop off, then the IAP seriously declines. So we have found a really, really interesting segment here where you could show users more audio ads and they grind for it to get in-game currency. And this is something that we've done with Social Point. They're owned by Take-Two and we're in their largest puzzle game. That's been a phenomenal success in terms of providing incremental revenue. And then you've got, your hardcore games as well, some of which I can't mention based on certain legal agreements, but there's definitely a massive avenue for these hardcore games with 3D environments where you've got your avatar, in-world unit economics, etc. In terms of its own economy. We can basically put audio ads in any kind of environment, and we've spent the last 2.5, nearly 3 years researching that. So it's a very, very versatile format, which is why we know it's here to stay. It's why there's not just Audiomob. There's many other competitors now entering the space because of the value it provides.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's interesting. Thanks for breaking that down a bit more. I guess, to kind of cover and we've talked a lot about like the benefits, which, could be they're less intrusive. It's a new type of inventory, pretty flexible in where you put it, all of that. But on the flip side, I'm curious, what are the trade-offs here? So for example, if I hear an ad while playing, maybe it's a decent, brand ad, but maybe it's less effective for direct response, which is a lot of what you see in games, trying to get other games to download, to click on something, etc. And maybe that's not bad, but I'm curious, what are the other nuances to consider that are just fundamentally different to how companies should think about implementing audio ads versus the more visual or video-driven ads that they've used previously?
It's a really good question, and we kind of have learned about baptism by fire. This was back in early 2021, actually, where we gave the audio ad, this is when we had less examples, so we gave the audio ad Unity plugin, and we were like, okay, here's some ideas for you in terms of how you can integrate this into this was a hyper casual racing game, like a biking game. And the developer treated the audio ad unit like a video ad unit. So you've got, your 5.5 minutes roughly, is the average user time session. And they were putting 30-second audio ads every 30 seconds. Now, even by video ad standards, I mean, you don't really want to watch 30 seconds of ads every 30 seconds in 5 minutes, like 50% of your time. It's not going to work, is it? So that was interesting. And what you could see is that there was a massive drop off in retention. And it was like, oh, it was audio ads. But no, it was because the best practices weren't used. So you can't really use this like a video ad because it's still at the early stages where games are not yet designed around audio ads. They're designed around video ads. So when it comes to, for us, it's very obvious where the examples are, and we just need to seed and educate the market. I believe in 2 years' time, the games are going to be designed around audio, just like they'll be designed around in-display native ads, those billboard ads, as well as your video ads. So that's something to be really, really careful with. It's not, just plugging in the audio ad every 30 seconds, just chucking in there and it will work. You have to really use the best practices that we've researched. Another thing as well is, I know we'll probably talk about this later in terms of the IDFA adjustments in the industry and whatnot, but my hypothesis alongside Wolfrid's, and we came up with this back in 2020, is that there's really going to be a new monetization stack. We're optimizing towards the 5% of, or 4 or 5% of the users, 8 on a good day, who actually interact with IAP. Just optimizing towards those users isn't gonna work. Or just optimizing to the users that watch video ads. Again, all of these are below double digit, and you really need to have the right formats shown to the right users. So the other example I'll give is a lot of developers were initially concerned that, the CPMs for us range between $5 to $10 for non-rewarded and up to $15 for rewarded. For certain IP buys, it could go up to $40 on some occasions. But the point is that, you could get a rewarded video ad that's like $40 to $80, right? And you've got one trigger point for the reward. You don't really need to use that trigger point because you're going to have certain users, for instance, that will keep grinding the video ads until there's none left. Or they will grind the video ads and then you show them one or two audio ads and then you revert them back to video. So this isn't a way to displace how you're currently monetizing, but it can be used additionally as well. It's just that there needs to be more nuanced thinking as to where the exact trigger point is and where the placement will actually play. So again, these are quite nuanced and complicated topics that we have simplified through, our best practice research that we've done over the last nearly 3 years or so.
So Christian, you said the IDFA word, so maybe let's jump into that just a little bit more. And this might be a dumb question, but how are audio ads affected by Apple's ATT policies? Are you seeing, any challenges from less effective targeting, or is it still too small, early, or different? Or, if maybe this is more friendly to brand advertising, it's just, it works more favorably on average. How do you think about audio and IDFA? What's the story there?
So, to go into my background, I worked at Google and I worked at Facebook as a science partner. So that's measuring the true value of ads, becoming a measurement expert. And back in 2018, the week that I left, let's just say Facebook was very, very worried about what happened in 2021 with IDFA. There was like 4 main scenarios that were predicted. And when we left and we decided to start researching audio and really building the tech stack, our CTO, Wilfred, he's an ex-Google engineer, like expert in the space. We built the stack in a way where we knew that contextual advertising was going to be the bread and butter of generating the CPMs I previously mentioned. And we could use personal data as a way to further solidify those higher CPMs. But it wasn't, the be-all and end-all. And what we found is that when the IDFA scenario occurred last year, we were completely unaffected because our CPMs were built upon brand advertising, doing more a contextual targeting rather than using personal data. So developers have definitely started using audio as a way to kind of cushion spend. Now, don't get me wrong, from a UA perspective, there's still research being done to use audio as a UA tool. And for performance advertisers, it's still a bit of a tricky situation. But in terms of the way that we monetize using contextual ads, we were completely unaffected by the change.
Gotcha. All right, well, let's go ahead. We've been beating around the bush for a while, but let's talk a bit more about Audiomob specifically. And maybe to kind of start this part of the conversation, could you just say what exactly is Audiomob's product to kick that off? And maybe after that, you can talk a bit about the business model.
Yeah, so Audiomob's business is in 2 sides. So we have a Unity plugin that we use. That's a drag and drop solution that can be very, very easily integrated into games built with Unity. Next year, there'll be a general SDK where we can integrate into any app. And then we also work directly with advertisers as well. So rather than just relying on third-party demand sources, we actually have our own DSP, our own advertising platform, and we interact directly with advertisers, agencies, resellers, and of course, big brands.
Okay, cool. And as very much a non-ad tech expert, something that I've been wondering is why do we need a new company to focus exclusively on audio ads? So I'm curious, Christian, what competitive advantage in your mind comes from that focus that other existing ad networks or other kind of companies in the sphere can't mimic?
That is a good question, an investor kind of question, and we got asked this a lot during our seed stage. So I'm going to be really candid, right? Taking an audio ad that could have gone into Spotify and putting it into a game, it's a very, very simple concept. Like when I tell people about this idea, you get exactly the same reaction. It's like, oh, that is like an obvious idea. But there's a very obvious reason why, this didn't exist before. when you take an audio ad and you put it into Spotify, you assume that the audio state of the device is on. I mean, who the hell listens to Spotify muted, right? You just don't assume it. It's just like, for instance, an ad that might go into a console game, right? People don't play console games muted. However, there is a lot of debate around a mobile game. Is the volume of the handset on? Is the iPhone mute switch on or off? If it's on, does the SDK that's supplying the ad content, is it going to obey whether the iPhone mute switch is on or off? Is the person listening to Spotify? Is the game sound effects on or off? Like, there's all these different variables which we call the audio state of the phone. Now, what we're able to do is analyze the audio state of the phone and ensure that the volume is at a certain level. For us, it's at least at 30%. And we're the only company in the world that does this. This has already been verified. And what we're able to do is send an audio ad to the right user with the right audio state. So, for instance, if a user's listening to Spotify, we don't want the audio ad to play over Spotify. We want to pause Spotify, capture the timestamp of where the track is or the podcast is, play the ad, and then unpause it, all in a seamless fashion, and maybe the user gets a reward at the end if it's rewarded. The advertiser also gets verification that the audio ad has played. So it's not just a verification that, let's say, the impression, that the banner has shown to the user, but the actual audio has delivered to that user at a certain volume. And all this data is passed back programmatically as well. So the reason that we're able to do this is that it isn't just taking audio and plugging it into a game. We've had to build out the whole ecosystem that has mimicked video ads, right? So we've had to build the plugin, the mediation server. So we've literally invented in-game audio mediation, like the mopop of audio, if you will. We've built the ad exchange. We've built the DSP. We've done all the connections, all the R&D with the ad network. So we could also convert the inventory. We've literally had to do like everything and control the whole ecosystem, if you will, so it's done properly. And what every other ad tech stack has to do in order to enter this space, like let's say a typical video ad network, is they have to retrospectively adjust all of their stacks to accept all the different audio signals as well as all the video signals. But they've got to do it for a smaller addressable market, because the video ad industry is worth hundreds of billions of dollars, right? And the audio ad industry is still up and coming. And for them to do that and allocate the same amount of love and resources that their tier one revenue opportunities are providing them, it's just going to be a much, much slower and rigorous process. So it's taken a specialist like us to unlock the opportunity, because we are literally masters at what we do, and we're not doers of all and masters of none. So we have a real focus on what we're doing here.
Right. That makes sense. And you said it was a very investor-y question, but it seems that answer seems to have worked for you guys, because I think it was maybe last year. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but Audiomob raised a 15 million Series A or 14 million Series A at $110 million valuation. So congrats on that.
Thank you.
And I'm curious. Obviously, that gave you a lot of firepower to an ammo to work with as you're building up this business. You mentioned launching an SDK that connects all apps and cool things like that. But could you just give us a snapshot of the business right now? What does Audiomob look like right now, and what are you reinvesting into right now?
Yeah, so this year was definitely a year of headcount growth. So we raised the Series A in November of 2021. We were at around 13 people or so, and then we increased to 41 people by the following November. Now in December, we should finish at around 45 or so. So really what we did is we concentrated on all of the core directors of the business to aid our global expansion. So we really wanted to get out of this whole idea of, we're a startup, we're scrappy, we're going to try to do everything as quick as possible. It's like, no, we're planning to IPO down the line, and we want to build a really strong foundation of exceptional people. So we did that, and alongside that, we started creating the sparks, if you will, of massive growth conversations. So we're not looking to, do a couple of million a year next year. I mean, we're looking to do some serious revenue to unlock a Series B that could get us, if not to unicorn status because of the current economy, damn near close to it or on the way there. And a lot of those growth conversations, we now have the people and the commercial traction and the initial traction with big game developers, not all the way scaled, but definitely in some of their games to execute that next year. So what we're concentrating on now is, now that we've got the people, is the global expansion so that we can support developers and our agencies and demand partners in territories locally, like the US, like LATAM, Australia, Southeast Asia, etc.
Gotcha. No, that sounds really exciting. And you mentioned, the plan to IPO, and I read an interview with Wired, and in which you said a couple interesting things. One of those was also around that. You said, and just to quote, "The reason our valuation is so high and why we got investors like Google, Makers Fund, and Lightspeed Venture Partners is because we have a very specific plan to IPO. We see Audiomob as being pretty much the ultimate audio content delivery platform." Now, that's a big vision. And so you just mentioned kind of what you're saying is a plan to scale, but how, maybe just in a bit more detail, just kind of, I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm curious too, like, how do you plan on getting from here to there? Like what is next for the company to like really enable like that kind of scale?
So I'll give as much detail as I can without revealing the playbook. But
Of course.
working at Google and Facebook and just seeing that the way that they approach problems has really educated myself and Wilfred as to how to plan for not problems that you have now, but ones in the future, in terms of how to IPO in a downturn, for instance, how to build a certain product in a certain way so we can navigate around IDFA, like all these different things. And we've been really, really rigorous in researching our ad tech and gaming history, right? There's a reason that King scaled the way it did, or Supercell or Rovio. There's a reason why AppLovin is one of the leaders, Unity, IronSource, InMobi, Mopub. Like, we've read up on all these different strategies, and we have a very, very specific method in terms of what we need to build, what we need to raise, companies that we need to acquire after said raise, IPO, companies we're going to acquire after we IPO. Like, we've really thought 8 years ahead. And a lot of that initial thinking is to do with our IP, because you've got to build a lot and have a plan to build a lot down the line before you can then sell what you plan to build in order to get that commercial traction. So we really, really planned out what we're going to do. And it's based on the proven methodologies of said companies, right? I mean, there's a reason why all these billion-dollar companies I've mentioned have got there, is that they have proven out a segment of their market. And we know that based on how Audiomob is the first mover, we've proven the validation, we have shifted venture capital into this area. Now there's competitors coming in, then there's going to be more spend coming in. Everything is happening that we have predicted. And as long as those key benchmarks keep happening at each stage of our plan, which we have said and proven to investors in specific milestones, that's what we've pitched to get there, and we totally believe in the plan that we have and the vision that we have.
Cool. That's really interesting. Sometimes I wish that I worked at a Google or a Facebook just to see how they like approach problems and think about scale, as you were saying. But thanks for expanding on that. In that same interview with Wired, you said something else that I thought was interesting. And again, to quote, you said, "I do feel the rigor behind our R&D efforts is really overlooked. We had to not only create this industry in the most literal sense, but then validate it as well." So Christian, I'd love for you to unpack this statement too. Zooming back to when you just started the company, how did you think rigorously about R&D and validating what you were doing, especially since it was a brand new market? Was it all based on feedback from prospective customers, or how did you think that through at the time?
So I started doing a hell of a lot of reading, right, on Facebook, a lot of Facebook, sorry, sort of initially Apple's secret labs, right, where they do their research. Just reading a lot of public knowledge. At Google, I looked into Google X. Why does Google X exist? Why does Alphabet have 100 companies? Why does Apple only have like a very few specific companies that they concentrate on? At Facebook, I actually looked into Facebook Reality Labs. Why does that exist? And then, of course, there's Amazon as well. So I started looking into all these big companies and like how their labs worked, why they existed. And to me, I mean, there's quite an obvious reason why you've got some of these companies that are worth $1 trillion that are still able to grow at an average over a number of years at around 20% a year. It's insane. It's the fact that they keep innovating and staying at the front of the curve. So I guess the way that we think about it, because me and Wilfred are like yin and yang in terms of I'm like, let's go to the moon as fast as possible, and Wilfred's like, let's do it in a scaled way. So because he's always very aware of scope creep, and the way that we approach it, right, is that when we started thinking about Audiomob, then validating at least that the audio ads in games was a thing, we then had like 1,000 different ideas in terms of the applications of these audio ads. And after like doing a little bit of research into some of these other applications, we were like, okay, these 9 different ideas can generate $100 million each if we execute on the vision, because the total addressable market is definitely there. So we did this by not just talking to clients, but there's loads of partners that reach out to us saying, oh, have you thought about this? It would be great to have this feature. Some of the partners that have approached us actually have attempted to design the feature, but couldn't for various reasons. Other partners have this technology that we don't have, and then we want to integrate with them. And all of these things are really, really interesting for the future of the company in terms of increasing our valuation on an IPO or actual bottom line revenue once you raise the money to build those subsidiaries. And all of that needed to be aggregated into a lab. And we knew that because of all the research we did, finding out what we did at Google, at Facebook, but also reading about all these other labs as well. So it just made sense that if we really want to show investors that we're going to get to, you know, $1 billion valuation, a $20 billion valuation, whatever it's going to be, 6 to 8 years time, that we showed them that we had this knowledge and had this plan and thought this far out. And to our Series A investors, we actually brought forward the R&D lab, which is active right now in Abu Dhabi, and we have a head of moonshots. And we actually took that structure of grace based on, you know, Google X and then Moonshot Lab, right? So we took a lot of inspiration from that, and we came up with a plan, and then we just followed it.
Very cool. So I know also that ad tech, you know, typically is very much a land and expand type of business. And I imagine, again, you don't have to spill any secret sauce here, but I imagine you are targeting larger customers. And then once you win with them on something, it's easier and more cost effective to then work with them on their next game, their next subsidiary, et cetera. So, you know, I'd love to just learn how you've improved at or systematized that act of deepening relationships with companies. Just to other, you know, founders out there, any lessons learned or advice on anything you've learned doing that so far?
So what I would say, and I wish I gave myself this advice back in 2020 when literally it was like there was no rule book and we're just trying to like figure things out. It's don't assume that the client that you're interacting with has the framework for you to follow in order to scale you. So I'll give you an example. There are monetization managers that we've spoken to where, for instance, we'll give a best practice, and then because of de-risking the integration, they'd want to do like a quick and scrappy way, but that quick and scrappy way would lead to a decreased retention. Could be an increased ARPDAU, but decreased retention, which wouldn't make them happy and would just waste everyone's time. So being like really, really rigorous with the scaling framework and not assuming that your client is going to know what that scaling framework is and that they'll use it for other companies. Just don't do that. Instead, have a very systematic step, and even put that into a contract if you need to, of if you follow these best practices, we meet these benchmarks, we provide you this revenue, And then if you were to scale this to 5 games, 10 games, or whatever, like have that all in like almost like a joint business plan. So it's almost like it's a plan that's either contractually you're contractually obligated to follow that plan, or you just do a handshake agreement, but there's a contract somewhere else which has some of those key KPIs. So, and then this is all not just the scaling plan, but even a test plan where it's like a 10K DAU. Just have all of that documented in terms of what you need to do, so you can always refer to that in the conversation. I'd say that is the key thing that we learn. And once we've done that, I mean, sometimes you have to tell a much bigger developer than you from a valuation, a headcount standpoint, like, no, we need to slow down. I know you're very excited about this, but we need to do it in this way. Otherwise, everyone's going to waste time and lose money. So yeah, just taking that more authoritative viewpoint there and structuring things so it's easy for a large group of people on the client side to follow. That's absolutely key to systematically scaling a big client.
That's really well said. Good advice. Well, as we kind of enter the later part of the conversation and wrap things up, Christian, I'm curious, as an entrepreneur and CEO, what have been your biggest learnings over the past couple of years? I know it's been, pretty wild economy and venture market environment, and even ad tech environment too. So I'm curious, just throughout all of this, like what has stood out the most to you as like a biggest personal learning?
Biggest personal learning, there's two and they're kind of intertwined. We are dealing with a macroeconomy that spits out more black swan events. So these are events that cause a double-digit downturn in an economy, right? There's more of this in the last 2 years than the last 20 years. And the cadence keeps increasing. COVID, you got a recession, you got a war in Europe. Like, it's really, really bad. So planning for black swan events every 2 years is key. Like, we're planning for, a new COVID strain to kind of wipe out revenue. Like, we're making these plans now. So that's a key thing that I wish I prepared for at the beginning of 2020, but I never would have known, right? But that's a key bit of advice.
What does that mean? What does that mean in practice to prepare for something that you can't predict? Does that just mean like having more cash on hand, or what does that mean?
So I'll give you an example. Since the beginning of this year, I have made it a mandate to talk to investors, even if I absolutely don't need to, because I always need to be ready to raise a drop of the hat's notice. Also finding out more from investors about how the macroeconomy is. A lot of founders are like, I'll talk to investors when I'm raising and then send an update. You need to always be talking to investors. We saw the recession coming in February based on some investor parties I went to at GDC. And then we started preparing for, okay, if there is a downturn and availability of capital dries up, availability of certain types of revenue dry up, just constantly preparing for the absolute worst. Next year, for instance, if we have zero revenue where our core revenue is coming from, what are the recession-resistant verticals, right? What are the brands that spend in times of economic downturn during COVID or 2008? Who are the investors that might invest? I mean, we found out, right, that VCs just do not invest in companies that are even doing well right now, but there's a ton of angels that do. So you have to change your investment strategy from not a VC strategy, but an SPV strategy. So it's all these different things that you constantly have to prepare for. If you prepare for the unknown unknowns, just prepare for the absolute worst thing that could tank your business tomorrow. And that's how we operate now.
Gotcha. And I know I cut you off in the middle of your answer. So what was part two?
Part two is, sounds counterintuitive, but it does make sense. It's also prepare for the best. So, this was back in 2021. So we're constantly like preparing for the worst. And we forgot to prepare for the best. There was like a 7-figure deal that just came out of nowhere, and we weren't ready to accept it. We didn't have the headcount. We didn't have the right inventory, but we didn't know that, Disney was going to come around the corner and just say, hey, we want to shovel this money at you. We were ready for that this year, though. But preparing for the best is definitely key. Prepare for the fact that your revenue could also potentially, 5x or 10x in the space of a month if you're doing well. That's a really key thing, and then both of those things combined, I think that's the reason that we've had triple digit growth, even though the economy's tanking in double digits right now.
Awesome. That's really, really good advice. Really thought provoking. I'll be thinking on that for a little bit too, for Naavik. So thanks for sharing. Also, through Audiomob, you've built a mentoring program for minority and general students. And in general, Christian, you seem passionate about both empowering those around you and prioritizing diversity and inclusion, at least based on what I've read online. And so I'm curious, do you have any advice on how to distill a diverse and mentor-friendly culture into a company from day one?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one key thing is that there's there's a ton of successful companies out there that recruit in in certain ways, right? Whether it's going on LinkedIn, job boards, certain events, for instance. The way that certain demographics, whether it's women, whether it's people of a certain ethnicity, or part of the LGBTQ plus demographic, they all participate in different groups. So it was very, very simple for Audiomob. It's the effort that we put in to get the certain kinds of candidates that are on LinkedIn or on certain job boards or go to certain events. We just diversified where we were spending times and ensuring that we were targeting events and groups and things like that that were outside of where you would normally target. So it's just taking a very holistic approach, even with the kind of approach with the language of our job board, our job adverts, for instance, and how we post on LinkedIn. The amount of podcasts that we do to kind of really promotes the employee value proposition. We just did all of these different things so that we get candidates from all over the world. I mean, it is definitely no it's no coincidence that Audiomob is like one of the most diverse startups in ad tech, without question, and we're doing so well. It's just that we've done all these things, and we've employed people that are representative of the demographics that we're influencing, which is gamers, which is everyone. So yeah, just do what you're doing, but just target different groups, different job boards, and you will get a diverse company, and your company will be better for it, without question.
Gotcha. Well said. Final question for you, maybe putting, audio and ad tech aside, since this is a gaming focused podcast, Christian, I'm just curious, what else in the games industry are you excited about going into 2023?
Two things I'm really, really excited about. So the first thing is, given the FTX fallout and what's going on in Web3 right now, I really believe this is a good thing for the gaming industry, because the good companies that are generating these great Web3 games, where you're not just drawing the users because of a Web3 economy, but it's based on actually having a good Web2 oriented game with a Web3 economy, I think that is going to produce some insanely good games with next level retention that we've never seen before. So I'm really, really excited to see where that goes. And this is across mobile and non-mobile games. The other thing I'm really interested in is how this whole VR metaverse kind of scenario plays out. I'm really interested to see if Facebook can remain the leader that everyone wants to lead in this whole VR metaverse narrative. So those are the two things I'm excited to see unfold over the next year.
Awesome. Well, Christian, thank you again for joining me today. It was a pleasure learning more about your vision with Audiomob and just your thoughts and learnings as an entrepreneur as well. And I look forward to seeing where you and the team take it from here.
Thanks for having me. It was really, really good fun conversation. So I appreciate the invite. Thanks, Aaron.
Sweet. And to all of our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to give us a like, subscribe, 5 stars. It would mean a lot. We'll put the links to all things Christian and Audiomob in the description below. And of course, we'll drop some links to Naavik's resources as well. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.